That right there is my Vincent Bach Stradivarius Model 229CL C Trumpet. It's a professional instrument, a very high quality one, and it's what very many professional players use for their orchestral needs. Now, a friend of mine who graduated from GU last year has a very rare and very old C Trumpet that is, in so many ways, the absolute opposite of this Bach Stradivarius. I think we're in for a treat today. Stay tuned. How's it going, y'all? It's Sam here from the Samuel Plays Brass channel. Hope you're all doing well on this fine day, and I appreciate you tuning in. Once again, we're talking about a very rare C trumpet because it has some very interesting features that you do not see today on most trumpets. This is not a Bach, not a Yamaha, nor a Shires, nor a Schilke, none of that. This is a vintage Reynolds from the year 1959. A lot of modern C trumpets are designed with a large bore construction. For instance, this Bach Strad has a 0.462 inch bore at the valve section, as opposed to the typical 0.459 of most B-flat trumpets. I know it's 0.03 of an inch difference, so it doesn't sound like terribly much, but nonetheless, 459 is considered a medium large and the typical industry standard, whereas 462 is considered a large bore by most accounts. Now, the Reynolds is notated LB on the backside of the valve casing, which generally would mean large bore, one would think, but it is actually 0.458, and some might make the argument that, oh, well, bore sizes have generally increased in size since the year 1959, but as far as I'm concerned, for instance, the Vincent Bach Company has kept their bore sizes largely the same for long before that. I mean, the 459 standard has been around for a minute and a half, shall we say. Now, the bell of this instrument is really something to behold. The flare itself is not that small. It's 4.5 inches as opposed to the 4 7/8 or 5-inch flares that we typically see today, but that's nothing too crazy. The throat of the bell, though, the part right before the flare, is exceedingly narrow. The bell also has a very large and wide bell rim, and it doesn't have any markings on it. I expected maybe I'd find a model number there, but alas, nothing. However, my best guess is that this would be a Contempora model, like a lot of Reynolds higher grade instruments. Now let's talk about the instrument's tuning system, which, if I'm honest with you, is most of the reason why I'm even doing this review in the first place. This highly unusual system is driven by the left thumb. This instrument has the typical third slide shunt as you would see on most trumpets, but it lacks a first, and instead it has something better, a whole horn tuning system. This thumb ring links up to the main tuning slide, which, after you set to some 0 point, can be operated, moved in and out by a spring system, although the spring is not doing a great job of always returning the tuning slide back to the same position. And what's useful about this spring system, at least when it works properly, is that it allows you to not only flatten pitches like a normal tuning trigger, but also sharpen them. And because there are certain flat notes and certain sharp notes on the trumpet, and sometimes you need to go in either direction depending on the scenario, this is extremely useful. There's also a little bit of adjustability available to you with this trigger system. You can move that thumb ring up or down depending on the size of your hands, and you can also set that tuning slide exactly where you want beforehand with a tuner by unscrewing it from the mechanism, setting it in place, and then screwing it back in. Overall, this tuning system is, in my opinion, really cool and ingenious, especially the way it goes in both directions of the pitch, and part of me wishes we saw it on more modern instruments. I think it'd be really useful, but the brass tech in me does acknowledge that it's a terrible pain to service an instrument with all these linkages and screws hanging off of it in various directions, so I can understand why maybe we don't see it terribly much on modern horns, but there are also a few things that make it a little bit of a challenge in my opinion. The first thing I noticed was that it's very easy to become over-reliant on the trigger system. Looking back on that practice session, I was triggering way too much, completely unnecessarily, and ironically, by adding more muscular tension into my thumb and the rest of my body, you know, when I tense my thumb, my whole forearm tenses up, that was actually making me play out of tune anyway, just in new ways. Pretty stupid. Also, it's a little bit counterintuitive to use at first because when you pull your thumb towards you, you extend the tuning slide outward, and vice versa. These opposing directions took me a second to get used to. They're really strange, and I wish it could kind of go the other way, but that would introduce even more mechanical complexity into the overall mechanism, so I can understand why not. I also don't find the whole mechanism to be very ergonomic, and that's why so much bodily tension was being introduced by me using the trigger. It requires large hands to use comfortably. Anything that requires you to extend your thumb this far away from you, it does not work with this size of hands on trumpet, unfortunately. Another thing was that the mechanism liked to catch on the lip of the tuning slide leg and get stuck and not always return to the same exact position. And let me tell you, from first-hand experience, it can really screw with your head when you let go of the trigger and it doesn't go back to the same place and all of a sudden you're playing with a different tuning than you were before. Not fun. And the other thing I ran into was that the screws would vibrate loose if I played for a little bit too long, and so I realized I would have to tighten them periodically. Overall, lots of little complexities that make this trigger system not necessarily all sunshine and roses. Quick interjection here, just want to remind everybody watching that I have a Patreon page set up at patreon.com/SamuelPlaysBrass. Lots of different tiers and rewards available if you're able to chip in and if you want to support the creation of bigger and better content. So if you find you got a few bucks weighing your wallet down and once again you want to support bigger and better content, then once again, patreon.com/SamuelPlaysBrass is the ticket. Thanks y'all, and back to the video. And now, without any further stalling, it is time to talk about how this horn plays. And this is going to be difficult as someone who's pampered with a Bach 229 because the differences between the Reynolds and the Bach 229 mean that there are some things I like about the Reynolds, and full disclosure, there are some things that I really don't like. We'll start off though with a more positive note. I think the narrower and more cylindrical bore construction actually makes the Reynolds more in tune than something like a Bach on certain notes. For instance, it does not have a stupidly sharp middle C like this Bach does. That is truly one of the strangest foibles of the nicer C trumpets, is that the middle C will seem to ride about 35 cents high if you let it. It is just stupid. I have fought against and wrestled with that middle C on that Bach Strad more times than I can count, and it's incredibly annoying. So the fact that the Reynolds wasn't like that on middle C and I didn't even have to use the trigger for that, very refreshing. Now, articulations, once again, because of that narrower construction, are very clear and have a ringing quality, but the trumpet will back up on you if you overdo those articulations, and so you really have to keep them light, as you'll hear in this comparison. But the part I've really been dreading and putting off is the sound of this instrument, because compared to modern large bore C trumpets, I'd like to think it's just me, but the trumpet sounded thin, harsh, and exceedingly bright. It wasn't as noticeable on louder and more technical excerpts as long as I didn't let my playing get edgy, because then the horn would get really edgy, but anything soft, melodic, or in the low register really seemed to reveal some significant weaknesses with the instrument. And unfortunately, deeper cups seemed to have little to no effect in this area. Everything still felt brittle and strained. For instance, I was using this Bach Megatone 1.5A. It's my main B-flat mouthpiece, but that A cup is deeper than what I tend to use on C trumpet, and this deep of a cup is even pushing it for most people on B-flat trumpet. Even so, just really brittle. And then if I used my Bach Symphonic 1.5C, it's shallower, but it has that beefy 24 throat, which is a little bit wider, and should let a little bit more wind through to keep the sound from getting super edgy. Still a lot of trouble. I really wish I could end off on a more positive note, because when I first laid eyes on this horn, I thought it was the coolest thing since sliced bread, and I wanted nothing more than to try it for myself. And then I did try it, and I found I had lots of issues with the sound and the feel, and even that awesome trigger system that I was so enthralled by. and the whole experience kind of just reminded me as to why I and so many others play that style of C trumpet. The typical large bore Bach 229 type deal is just better suited for modern settings, and unfortunately there is a reason we left pea shooter C trumpets back behind in the 50s and 60s and didn't really proceed with that going forward and favored things like this. But then again, that's kind of the reason I made this video. This is a very rare and unique instrument we're talking about. I'd never seen one before like it, and I've never seen one since that's quite like it. And online there's very little information about anything even close to what it was that I showed off to you today. So I'm glad I got the opportunity, and I hope the trumpet community will benefit from seeing this interesting piece of history. And Kyle, I know I complained a lot about your horn, but thank you for the opportunity to play it and show it off. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll stick around for more. You can find more instrument reviews in the playlist up in the top right corner. And one more thing, make sure that you're actually subscribed to the Samuel Plays Brass channel below, unlike the vast majority of my viewers there. Not only is it an easy way to stay up to date with my content, but it's a small gesture with a huge impact on the channel. Anyway, until next time, we'll see you on the flip side. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want to support the creation of bigger and better content on the Samuel Plays Brass channel, have your name featured right here, and a whole host of other perks and benefits, then please consider pledging your support at patreon.com/SamuelPlaysBrass. For now, you can find more videos in the end screen cards to my left.